Okay, greetings. We're back for episode 4 of the FileMaker Fanatics podcast, and we've got a whole crew on the podcast today. We've got the regulars. We have Shaq. Aaron?
Hi there. This is Aaron Shaq, and I'm from Canyon Computer Services. I'm a newer FileMaker developer, so I hope to add that type of, vibe to the podcast.
And we've got Scott Rose.
Hello, this is Scott Rose of scottworld.com. I've been doing FileMaker for 23 years. Oh, by the way, Tony, I hate to interrupt, but so early in the show, but we have a very important announcement tonight. Today, of all days, we're recording this on September 29th, 2015. It's Aaron Shaq's birthday today.
Oh, my God.
Yes! Aaron, happy birthday!
Thank you for acknowledging. I was not expecting that.
And it was John Marina's birthday a few days earlier.
Oh, happy birthday.
With John Marina. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. This is John Marina of Pueblo Systems and CCQ FM in New York on Long Island.
And we have Marion Carroll, also from New York.
Yes, I'm on the other side of New York, on the very left edge of the state in Sloatsburg, and a longtime member of the New York FileMaker Developers Group.
And we brought John and Marianne onto the phone because in our last episode, Scott Rose made comments that were both outrageous and true about the New York FileMaker Pro User Group. And so we figured we'd bring him on and show him what's what. So we also have a theme, and by the way, we can sing "Happy Birthday" on the show because they just lifted the copyright on the song, so we don't have to pay.
They lifted the copyright?
Yeah, there was apparently a court case, and so we could sing it, but let's not.
No, we should. We should sing it to Aaron because he left a birthday party to come do this podcast.
I promise you, if anybody sings "Happy Birthday," I will edit it out.
No, let's all sing. Let's all sing to Aaron because he actually left his own birthday party to do the podcast.
Really? Well, that is pretty impressive.
So we should do it. We should sing. 1, 2, 3.
Just one round. Happy birthday to you.
One round. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
Aaron.
Aaron.
Happy birthday to you.
And we're actually fortunate to have Marion Carroll on the phone because she was a member of the group. What was the name?
It's called Chic of the Freak fame.
Yeah, La Freak. Then again, it is a podcast about FileMaker.
Yes.
So maybe we'll start off with a little FileMaker content. And we had a coin toss earlier. So John and Marianne, the theme of the podcast, because of course we have to have a topic. The theme of the podcast is, solutions that have been done in FileMaker that are interesting. And like I said, we had a coin toss earlier. John, very democratic. John won the coin toss, and he's elected to go first. And so John's going to go and tell us about some solution that he had in FileMaker. You're on.
Well, I think you're actually misrepresenting my portion, but what I was planning on discussing today was an app that I have for iOS devices called CardSwipe. It's something we developed a few years ago to work in tandem with our credit card processing system, CCQ-FM. Once FileMaker Go emerged and we realized that we had a whole new platform to work with, we discovered very quickly that you can't just plug a MagStripe reader into an iOS device and drop the data into FileMaker Go in that case. Like you can on the desktop where you have a USB port and you can just plug in a USB MagStripe reader, open up WordPad or anything and swipe it and the data appears. So we realized we needed to generate an app to sit in between FileMaker Go and the MagStripe reader that would be connected. So we did this a number of years ago. We have a second rev that came out a little while ago, just recompiled for the newer OSs. And right now we're working on integrating an EMV reader into the application. And that should be done in the next few weeks, and we'll have that up as well. But basically, there's no other way to get MagStripe data swiped directly into FileMaker Go. We contacted a company that produces these readers, ID Tech, and they were very helpful in helping us integrate with the iOS. They have a really great SDK. Now, the new EMV technology is using the chip in the card. Soon, everyone they have a cutoff date, which they'll probably have to move because not everyone's going to be ready. But the new credit cards coming out all have chips in them, and those chips are designed to make theft a little more difficult. Of course, somebody will figure it out, but for now they haven't. And so in working with the chip reader, it's a completely different technology. There's a code that has to be sent to the reader to identify it. It sends back a signal, and then you send another code back, and then finally the MAC stripe, what would be on the MAC stripe, the card number, expiration date, name on the card, is returned. And then there's also the ability to request that a PIN verification occurs as well. It can be done without a PIN, and it can be done with a PIN. And actually, I was in Canada last year, and in all the restaurants, they never take your card out of your hand. They bring a device to the table, your card is inserted, and then if you have a PIN, it would be typed in to the keypad, and then the charge would be processed. So it's a whole other level of security that's been created.
So hey, John, just for our listeners, can you tell us can you define what an EMV? What does the EMV reader stand for?
No, I don't know what the acronym stands for. I mean, I can Google it quickly for us, but
it's the chip. Like all the new credit cards have these chips. Of course, every other country has had it since the 1980s. We're 30 years behind every other country, but it's finally coming to America.
Well, exactly. Like Canada, they're much more efficient. They bring a little terminal to your desk, to your table, and you do your swiping there. The card never leaves your hand.
Yeah.
That technology will eventually come, to place here. Now, there is a bit of a caveat with this whole EMV technology, because if you're doing any kind of credit card transactions through the internet, the nature of what you're doing is a card not present transaction. The EMV technology is really specifically designed for card present transactions, and that's really more for the POS industry, for restaurants and stores, where the readers would have, there would be PIN verification. And it's a different back-end platform that the processing is done through. Once you're going through, internet gateways and doing your transactions like we do, no matter what you're using, if you're using the plug-in from 360 Works, Plastic, or My Technology, either way, it's card not present transactions. So the EMV technology is something that isn't really that critical for that, but we felt that people were going to ask for it, and it should be included in the product. So
EMV. I just saw that EMV means Europay, MasterCard, and Visa. So it being available in Europe far before us seems to be in the title of its name.
And let me just say, we are an international podcast, and each of us are world citizens here. and all our listeners in Europe and all over the world, Australia, and pretty much everywhere.
This is actually.
Yeah, that's so true. So John, tell us how this works. So there is a piece of hardware, right? But it's not a USB chip reader, right? Is it like a Bluetooth chip reader that sends the credit card data to your app on the iOS device?
No, it's not Bluetooth. The original reader was the 9-pin or 10-pin connector on the bottom of the iOS device. Connected in that way. iMac Pro was the device that they made, and then they made an iMac Pro 2, which has the Lightning connector for the newer iOS devices. So
iMag, not iMac.
iMag, M-A-G.
With a G, yeah.
Yeah, that's the name of that's ID Tech's product name. The EMV reader, though, that we're integrating is plugged into the audio jack. That's the design on that one. and they have one in development that'll be out beginning of next year that is basically this. It's called a UniPay. The UniPay 2 or 3, whatever they're going to call it, is actually going to be the same reader, but with the ability to just wave your card in front of it, so you actually don't even have to insert it. It'll read the chip,
Wow.
So how
Magic.
do they get the data off the chip? Like you said, the card never leaves the person's hand, so it transfers to the device. Is that like RFID, or is that, I don't know, magnetic?
Well, that would be some type of RFID to read the chip when you wave it in front. Those things exist already, but in terms of this device for iOS devices, they're coming out with this, in a few months.
So John, go on. I'm sorry.
But the current one that we're testing, it works just the same. You just can't wave it in front. You have to stick it in. You have to stick it in a slot. It does two things. You can just swipe the card, the magnetic stripe, or you can insert it and read the chip.
Cool.
And
So
it's go on. Yeah.
It's a relatively complicated technology. There's these identifier codes that each card has. So you need to determine when the card is being swiped. You have to send a series of AINs, these numbers, to determine what card it is. Then the card will return a response that's a certain code, and then from that you can ask for the data. And there's an optional. There'll be an optional parameter that you can send to request a PIN verification after that. But the way the technology works is from FileMaker Go. We have a lot of documentation on our website, ccq-fm.com. But the basic way you work it is there's two scripts involved. On the iOS, for those who haven't done development on there, applications communicate via the URL protocol. So when you're in FileMaker, you'd have one script that would send a URL string to card swipe with the return path, the script you're going to run on return, etc., parameters you might want to pass. It's all well documented these days. So once that string is sent to card swipe comes to the front, which has to happen. It's the way iOS is designed. It comes to the front.
What's now? Is Card Swipe your app that you?
It's my app. Yeah.
It's a native iOS app that you download.
Native iOS app. You go on the App Store. You buy it there. It's also on the volume purchasing program store as well.
Okay.
So if you have a large business and you need a number of devices, you can buy them from the volume purchase and distribute them to all your devices.
I see. Okay, so your app. So you swipe the card. Your app.
The app comes forward, and it just, there's very simple screens on it. It just says swipe your card. As soon as you swipe the card, the app disappears, and the data is sent back to FileMaker, calling a script in the URL call that you attach to the original call coming into FileMaker. Obviously, without visual options here, it's hard to show,
It's kind of like a webhook or a callback in some
programming. It's a callback. So in other words, you would be saying ccqfm : / and then you would put in the string, the return string that's going to be coming back to you, and the name of the file, a script you want to run, any additional parameters that you might have wanted to send in that the next script you're going to call to process the card would need. And we attach the magstripe data to the end of that. It's raw magstripe data. That returns back to FileMaker Go, or FileMaker, if you happen to do this on the desktop, but you wouldn't be using our card swipe for that. It returns back, and then that script will parse. That script would take we usually suggest putting a variable at the end. So that's one of the nice parts about this whole URL communication is that you can put a variable at the end, and when it calls the script, it creates the variable. So you have your data right there, post it into temporary global, commit the record, and then we actually have custom functions on our site at the end of the documentation for the card number, for parsing the card number, the name on the card, and the expiration month and year. So you can actually take the response, drop it into one global, and call that global in these custom functions. And as soon as you commit the record, the data is already parsed and done and ready to go. And then from there, you would use whatever processing you're doing to send those transactions out to be processed to run your charge.
That's very cool. For their listeners who don't, who are not familiar with this, there's the FMP URL protocol in FileMaker. FileMaker introduced this to enable other apps on your iPhone to communicate, or on iOS, to communicate with FileMaker. So as long as there's an app that can call a URL, you can structure a specific URL that will launch any FileMaker database that you want. It could even launch with a specific username and password if you'd like. It can run any script that you'd like. It can attach a variable to it, as John was just saying. So what John is saying is that, John, what you're saying is that your app is acting as the middleman between this hardware credit card reader and FileMaker, and the way it's communicating to FileMaker is through this FMP URL protocol.
Exactly. And another thing that people are using this FM protocol for is actually it replaces using opener files. These web links, I guess, whatever you would call it, can be actually used to actually launch your files in a network setting.
Yeah, like you mean the on iOS they would be the buttons. You can make these buttons.
Well, it could be on iOS. It could be a button, or on a regular desktop machine. If you type in the string and you grab the URL that you've just entered and drag it to the desktop, it creates a web link, and that web link will take you right to that page, or right to that. Will open up the FileMaker app.
Yeah, it's a very powerful technique. I'm going to drop into the show notes, John, your link to the CCQFM, and also people probably already know this, but the URL protocol is something very near and dear to our hearts here because we did an infographic on it. It's a little bit of a sleeper feature, but apparently not to you because you're using it in a really, really nice way with an inter-application communication. That's very, very cool.
How long has this URL protocol been available in FileMaker?
Since FileMaker 11. Since
11?
FileMaker 11, yep. Wait, John, let me ask you a question. So in your app, your iOS app that we pay for and download from the App Store, does your app give us the ability to customize the entire FMP URL right there, where we can type in the script and the parameter and the variable, everything we want right there?
Actually, you do very little. Actually next to nothing in the app itself. The app itself is, and this was actually an issue we had when we tried to get the initial app certified by Apple. They turned us down initially, and I think was because they were like, what does this thing do? So I had to actually make a movie and show them how it got data, the only way to get data from a Mac Stripe. And this doesn't have to be just credit cards. It can be student IDs. I have a lot of universities that are using this. All sorts of, in certain states, driver's licenses have Mac stripes on them. So it can be used for many different purposes. But when we initially, submitted the app, I had to actually make a movie to show them the value of it, and then they go, okay, fine, we'll approve it. So there's really no configuration to do in the app. I mean, when you download the app, you'll see the icon on your desktop. If you plug in one of the readers and open up the app, it'll just show you swipe a card. And if you swipe a card, you'll see the data in on the layout inside the app. But as soon as you close the app, the data is deleted. So, and if you open the app and the device isn't connected, it'll say, please connect your reader. You connect the reader, it'll say connected, and then you can do a test swipe just to see that it's actually coming through. But that's not even necessary. So all the calling is done from FileMaker Go. So your first script would be something to the effect, you would say open URL, and you would say CCQFM://. That's how you call the app. FMP://, and then either you're going to put in an IP address if the app is hosted, or you're going to put an ellipse if it's local to the device. And then the rest of it is the FMP protocol. So it's FMP:// the ellipse of the IP / the file name, question mark, and then script equals the script you want to run on return, ampersand, here's my parameter, a record ID I need when I come back, and then ampersand, and then we say, we just suggest put the $ card data equals, and then we stamp our stuff on the back of that. So that open URL call is sent to CardSwipe receives it, comes to the foreground, the card is swiped, we attach our information from that, and now we're using the FMP, everything from FMP : / forward to send the data back to FileMaker Go.
So it's a round trip that initiates from the FileMaker Go app.
Oh my God!
It takes a second. It's very fast.
I can't believe this. Tony used the word round trip. That's exactly the word I was going to use, Tony. Tony, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say
circular journey, but
John, that sounds incredible. So basically, you start in FileMaker. You don't have to leave FileMaker as long as we have the script calling your app using the specific URL protocol for your app. It starts in FileMaker and it ends in FileMaker.
Right. I mean, we have had customers call us up and say, or email us and say, hey, is there any way to stop the app from coming forward? And we're like, no, it's just the way the iOS works. It has to come to the foreground to be activated. And we're actually working on the possibility of setting up some allowing people to customize their layouts in a future version. So they could kind of brand it a little bit for themselves. There has to be a landing screen when it opens, but then it could land there and then it could change the graphic for them, which we'll probably simplify things that way.
Now, can we use your app with like a hardware magnetic card stripe reader like the Linea Pro, for example, or do we have to use the specific hardware reader you're talking about?
It has to be the specific ones that we have right now. We're looking at the Linea Pro. That actually offers a number of different technologies all in one device. The price point on that device is a little steep. So I think, most people, they don't want to spend, a few $100s on a device unless they're doing some really heavy-duty work on it. So we kind of stayed with the iMag swipe readers that are, in the $50 range.
So let's say, hypothetically, like, for example, we have a client that invests in a ton of these Linea Pros. If you have the Linea Pro, are you saying that cannot communicate with FileMaker Pro at all? Or there's other ways?
Well, no, it can't. No, see, the way we discovered this is when FileMaker Go came out, I was like, awesome, this is great. I went out and I researched who made MagStripe readers for iOS devices, found ID Tech, bought one of the readers, got it, plugged it into the device, and the first thing that happened, it went to the App Store to look for apps that are programmed to use it. Because you have to use their SDK and program your app to read the data. It won't. So that's the difference between having a USB, like on a desktop computer, you can plug a USB MagStripe reader in, and it just works. It's like an extension of the keyboard. But that's not the same on the iOS device.
Like you need
if you have a customer that's invested in the Linea Pro and wants to go mobile, we would look at doing some integration for them. Because it is something that I've thought about, but we just haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, so you're saying, like, for these people, for example, that bought the Linea Pro, they're using a Linea Pro piece of software that Linea created.
Yes.
That the Linea people created.
Right, and they're probably, and there's I don't know if they're able to get that directly into FileMaker or if it's just going into a Linea Pro app.
Right, yeah.
Right, and then somehow on the back end you're getting the data from there into the FileMaker system. But we could actually program the Linea Pro to talk directly to FileMaker. I think that does it does MagStripe, barcode scanning. It makes fried eggs and
French toast.
and French toast.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, you know what? It's funny what you say because we actually, we were not involved with the Linea Pro thing. I think they must be using a custom, some non-FileMaker app for that. But with another one of our clients that's on all Macs, they are using a USB magnetic card swipe reader because it's a school, and we created magnetic ID cards for all the students in FileMaker. And that was no problem, like you said, because it's just a USB thing. They just come in the door. They swipe their card through it, and FileMaker is just capturing that information in a field and then parsing it.
Right, exactly.
So on the
So
Mac, it's no problem. It's on the iOS where you get into problems.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's application integration on iOS devices. So instead of on a Mac, you might use AppleScript, but you can't use that on iOS. So you're using what the tool is for iOS, which is this URL protocol.
Right.
Sweet.
Yes. So there's really not much more to it. We do also have a companion product, a credit card processing system, but with the PCI certification and everything, we've run into a bit of issue there on that. So they've made it quite difficult to continue going forward as a commercial app. But we're working at rebranding that and coming up with a different concept so that
Well,
how have they made it difficult? Tell me what the or tell us.
Well, initially, see what we did with our credit card processing CCQFM was I wanted to get around the third-party gateways because over the years there's been plugins in FileMaker for years. My standard business Pueblo Systems. I've been doing systems for 20 years, and over the years there's been plugins that will do credit card transactions, but they require an internet gateway. CyberSource, Authorize.net, there's a whole bunch of them. So, and earlier on, there were much fewer. When we first started this about 8 years ago, there were a lot fewer third-party gateways, so the costs were more. It was usually a $20 a month fee plus a percentage per transaction. And I think there still is a percentage per transaction. A lot of the monthly fees have dropped down to $10 or they waive them. But so I wanted to get around that. So I partnered with a local ISO who provides merchant accounts, and we connected up with Chase Payment Tech to process directly through them and bypass the third parties. But that came with a cost because they said, well, you can process through us, but you have to be PCI certified. So we said, okay, fine. We spent a heck of a lot of money becoming PCI certified and then found out 3 years later that we had to recertify. And when we called the company up, we said, oh, no big deal. They know our app. They know what we're doing. How much could it cost? Well, they wanted more money than the first time. And it was just too much. For a small company, I don't know how anyone could afford that. So basically,
can you give us an idea of how expensive it was?
The first time we did it, it was $12,000.
Wow. This is, John, I think you are going to be very, very, very excited for the future because this is what really boils my blood, is that for 65 years, right, the credit card industry has had a death-like grip, a death-like, vice-like grip on innovation because they are the gatekeepers of these little tiny payment networks. I mean, they're huge payment networks, right? But you have to go through these little tiny doors, right? And they charge these exorbitant fees to get people through these doors. They've been stifling all innovation. And then, a couple years ago, there is now an open source payment network that is accessible to the world. It's free. It costs no dollars to implement in any solution, and any programmer can use it in their solutions. It's worldwide. It's global. There's no fees. It's instant transactions. It's Bitcoin. It is completely open to everybody, and it's gotten $1 billion in venture capital investment, this new technology called Bitcoin. And, it's going to take like 20 years probably before it really, really takes off. Maybe less, maybe 10 years, I don't know. But the thing is, what's so amazing about this, for the first time in 65 years, finally we have innovation happening in the financial services world, in financial tech, where you don't have to go through gatekeepers. Any 13-year-old kid, any 40-year-old guy, any 50-year-old woman, anybody in the world can program Bitcoin into their systems for free. And we can finally kiss credit cards goodbye. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, right? It's a brand new technology. The internet took 30, 40 years to take off. Bitcoin's going to probably take 20 years to take off. And guess what? They are going to eventually lose. They are eventually going to lose as the world wakes up to the fact that there's now, I mean, again, it's going to take a while. This is not going to happen tomorrow. But the thing is, as soon as people wake up and they're like, wait a second, there's a free payment network out there. We can transfer money instantaneously around the world with no fees, and it's free to implement into any computer software solution anywhere in the world. It's going to revolutionize the world. Mark my words, in the year 2034.
And
Scott? Scott?
I wrote it down.
Scott?
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting it on my calendar.
Yeah, put on your calendar. Yes, Aaron?
January
Yes, Aaron?
1st.
I was just going to ask you, Scott, are there any compelling alternative cryptocurrencies out there that you like, other than Bitcoin?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. With something like a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which is a technology and a network and an open source software platform, what you really need is you need an open source platform that's got all the momentum behind it and all the developers behind it and all the money behind it. And right now, Bitcoin has the lead by far. $1 billion of venture capital money into Bitcoin, into the Bitcoin network. 1 billion with a B. I mean, there's no other cryptocurrency that has that sort of money behind it. For comparison's sake, the internet, when it first came out, only had something between 300 million and 500 million of VC behind it back in the late 80s, early 90s when Netscape first came out and stuff like that. So Bitcoin is really going to be the next wave of the internet, the next wave of innovation.
And Scott, you're saying the internet is, because I would say the internet is a fad. It's a passing fancy. So,
Bitcoin's, anyways, I think John is very well positioned, John, to take advantage of the coming Bitcoin revolution that's going to be coming in the next 20 years. I mean, it sounds like you're already the leader in this space for FileMaker developers.
Well, I don't know about that. I'll have to look into it, as it sounds very interesting. I haven't really paid much attention to it yet, but if there's a way to do it, I'll try to figure it out.
And
Now, Scott, don't you have a Bitcoin plugin that you're developing?
Yes, I was working on the Bitcoin plugin, and the problem was we were using a Bitcoin processing provider called Coinbase, and the Bitcoin plugin actually works. I haven't released it yet because there were some limitations with Coinbase. It didn't do every single thing that I wanted it to do, and so I'm sort of torn between releasing it to the public in sort of a less than 100% perfect state, or just releasing it anyways to the public.
Right.
So that's where I stand right now. I'm sort of a perfectionist, so I don't know what I'm going to do right at the moment.
Okay, all right.
So stay tuned. I'm sure that we'll hear more about the Bitcoin in a future episode. I predict that. John, just to wrap it up, this sounds awesome, and it sounds like a terrific opportunity for FileMaker programmers. It sounds like you've made it perfectly easy for them to, write some FileMaker Pro programming in Go and plug it into your app, and it sounds like an awesome opportunity.
Thank you.
So congratulations. Now moving on, we've got Marianne Carroll. And by way of introduction, Marianne Carroll is the only person currently on the podcast who has written a book about Microsoft Word, as far as I know.
Thank you, Tony. I'm probably the last person who will ever write a book on Microsoft Word.
They're still coming out. But anyway, you're a published author, a member of the band Shaq, as we mentioned, and you've got something to tell us about something. So
something about something.
The megaphone is yours.
Oh, thanks, Tony. And I guess I have to say that my introduction to FileMaker about 20-some-odd years ago was because I was doing Microsoft Word development, and I guess it was my gateway kind of drug into FileMaker because I did anything in Microsoft Word. I used it as in any way possible back then. And in the 90s, I wrote 2 books, one on Microsoft Word and then I had to mimic that for a version of WordPerfect DOS, if you can even imagine. So
Wow.
the program release went absolutely nowhere, but and those books sat someplace else on a shelf. But at any rate, I did have a very strong word processing background, and actually the first database I worked in was Double Helix.
Wow.
Does anybody remember that?
Please refresh our memory.
I do not know about that. Interesting.
And it was a relational database where you kind of dragged elements out into a layout background. And so when FileMaker finally went relational, I guess it's what version 4 of FileMaker was relational?
3.0.
3? I think it was 3.
3.0?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You got me.
3.0. Yep.
I understood the concepts for it. And what's really interesting to me, I hadn't thought an awful lot about Microsoft Word because when FileMaker came along and I saw its opportunities for development, because people, as technology moved along, people were just expected to know Microsoft Word. Companies weren't spending on training, nor were they doing highly stylized documents, which I incorporated a lot of mail merge commands to do rather complex dialog box generated documents. I'm not sure if anybody even knows the mail merge commands of Microsoft Word. Other than if, else, and if, there was an ask function back then that if you ran print merge, it could ask you questions and then do kinds of if and if branching to give you different kinds of results in your word processing documents.
Interesting.
And I had been brought in actually originally by Mount Sinai in their bone densitometry division to take apart and reprogram probably about 300 nested if-then-else statements for documents that they generated after getting their information on from FileMaker Pro. And it was an export, and then I just sort of was tinkering around to make sure that FileMaker Pro exported the fields correctly, and then we ran these highly formatted mail merges. So I kind of was my gateway into the world of FileMaker, and I met my first client through one of the legal clients I had. And interestingly enough, he is a tour manager for bands, and that on the road. Derek Trucks is one of his big clients right now that's doing very well. And having been on the road on tour with the band, I had a lot of understanding of what was involved in that. Along with FileMaker, I came to know FileMaker a lot better as a result of working with him. And right now, I'm actually rewriting his whole solution in FileMaker 14 in a big rewrite update. So it's very exciting to know that over 20 years later, I'm still working on a solution that began in Microsoft Word. So it was interesting, I felt, too, with FileMaker 13, when it came out with themes and styles, Tony and I had a big discussion about that. Didn't we, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some connections here because in Microsoft Word, anyone such as yourself who has worked with words knows that one of the things that has huge benefit is style sheets.
Style sheets, incredibly so. And I wished in a way, maybe I've not poked around enough in FileMaker 13 in the abilities, but in a Microsoft Word document, if you use the same names for your styles, you could open another document and import the styles as they were defined in that other document, and it would totally reformat your document in a second if you use the same names in each document. And it kind of triggered me like, well, what if you had a database where you had all your themes and style names the same, but you apply different colors, different line weights and fonts and sizes, and then you wanted to take the same naming convention but style it differently and be able to switch between solutions and import a theme and style configuration into your FileMaker solution and just maybe gather a glossary of template styles that you could use. But I didn't see that capability in FileMaker. I think it's more within the solution itself than between solutions. Am I missing something, Tony or Scott?
Now, so tell us how are you using FileMaker in conjunction with Microsoft Word now?
A little bit, not as much as I did back in the 90s, but I think most of the solutions that my clients have, there's usually one element where they need to export to do a Microsoft Word document because of the pagination capabilities in FileMaker that don't allow you to take one long text field and paginate and page break properly.
Right, yeah.
And with headers, appropriate headers like you would do a letter, like a 2 or 3 page letter or a contract. Often what we do is we take elements from FileMaker, export them out, and I have a structured document in Microsoft Word that when I run the mail merge, it plugs in all the data.
I see. So you're doing mail merges in Microsoft Word, and you're sending it the data from FileMaker? Are you exporting the data out of FileMaker to like a text file?
Text file, and then bringing it all into Microsoft Word. Mostly because the users in these particular documents, they want to be able to edit more freely than we can allow them in FileMaker and put page breaks where they feel they should be and not where FileMaker determines them to be. There's also, issues where I have a solution for a private investigator, and he does a lot of reporting on cases, and they have a lot of text that they make copy and paste from different documents that they are researching. But because of the reporting nature of it, we have to limit how much text they put in that field so that the page breaks will come and allow the text to be displayed correctly. And often it's kind of a balance between setting up something very, very structured in FileMaker where you kind of put bars around, don't go type any more text in this field or it won't show up in your document, or exporting it and then running it through a mail merge process within Microsoft Word so that they can then paginate themselves or sometimes even edit the document. And then what happens, too, is they may save that final document in a container back in the FileMaker solution so they have a record of what that was like, or they may save it as a PDF and send to the client as well. So there's kind of clients find themselves in a bind as to which platform, which application better serves my word processing needs.
Well, it sounds like you've taken a very pragmatic approach because FileMaker, we ask a lot of FileMaker, and it does a lot. It covers so much territory. It's like, it does, you can do a one-page straightforward letter in FileMaker, and you can stretch it with some virtual list. And there's times that if you want, like Marianne, you were saying, pagination with maybe, all the features, page breaks, widows and orphans, and stuff like that, well, then it's inter-application communication. It's get two programs to work together, and you get the best of both worlds. And FileMaker's frequently the hub. Like maybe FileMaker's talking to Excel, or FileMaker's talking to Word, or to an email client. FileMaker's kind of makes a beautiful hub.
A hub, you're right. And Scott, it reminded me, Scott, when you, in another podcast, you were talking about, like, what's really changed about word processing over the years. You remember mentioning that?
I don't, but I probably
I guess my ears picked up. Because, like you said, well, what's ever really going to change? I mean, hanging indents are hanging indents, different techniques for bullets and, paragraph alignment and whatnot. But what has changed, and I took a sneak peek at Office 365 and Microsoft Word 2016, they've become much more collaboration tools than they ever were. And in a preview copy, I saw that there was an actual button on the menu that said FileMaker Pro.
Really?
Wow.
Yes.
Is that a public preview?
It's the preview's over. Now they've got the product has shipped, so I haven't purchased it yet.
We're not breaking NDA when we say
not breaking NDA. Okay. And they made that preview copy very widely available. But when I worked with it, all the hooks weren't there. So basically, what it does when you hit it, you're asked to open. It's linked to an actual FileMaker Pro file, which if it has passwords, you have to go through the security to get in, but it could update, whatever merged data you had sent it so it could get the latest version of that data. Let's say somebody's address had changed. You could update your Microsoft Word document with the FileMaker Pro data.
But it's looking for a local FileMaker Pro file that's sitting on your desktop?
See, I didn't get to explore it further because the preview copy didn't allow me to actually test it out. It just was a button that went to an open FileMaker Pro dialog box. So I don't know. I guess it could be a hosted file. I don't think it would have to be something local. Though if those links, obviously Microsoft must be doing some kind of linking, recording where it was linked to in terms of the file and where it lived. So that must be embedded somewhere within the file.
Now, what you're saying is, so when you do these solutions with the mail merge in Microsoft Word, your clients, they've got to go through a manual process, right? They click on an export button, then they have to manually launch Microsoft Word, then click on an import button. Like, right, they're actually assembling these documents on their own, right?
Yeah, well, FileMaker can open the Microsoft Word document and bring it forward and open that document for you. But in terms of the print merge or mail merge, you have to run that command yourself or get Tony White to write a AppleScript so it does it automatically.
Yeah, Microsoft. Microsoft, as of a particular version, Microsoft invested a lot of money, and I think this is part of their Play Nice with Others campaign. They pulled VBA out of the product and they replaced it with a really robust AppleScript implementation, Word, Excel, and I have no idea about PowerPoint, but also Entourage, all very strong. Now it's Outlook, but Scott, were you saying something?
Yeah, but wait a second. So so talk me through this. So how do you launch Microsoft Word from FileMaker? Using the open URL? Or,
No, just
AppleScript only?
Send event, I think it is. You can do an application event to open Microsoft Word.
Oh, I see. And you could choose a document using send event. So basically, it's a form of AppleScript.
Well, it's a
send event.
Send event is,
well,
maybe that's an OS thing.
Yeah, there's some way down at the bottom of the script steps. There's some relatively obscure and somewhat infrequently used commands that. There's some that work on the PC platform only, and some that work on the Mac platform only, and they're pretty obscure. And you got to like pull out the documentation. If I was going to make a recommendation, I would recommend AppleScript because I think it's really pretty robust, and then that's just something like tell application Microsoft Word open file path blah blah blah, something like that. AppleScript very powerful. Sure. There's your takeaway.
That's
now, what about PCs? Can PC users communicate between FileMaker and Microsoft Word?
Oh, absolutely.
How do they do it without AppleScript?
Oh.
VB script?
Oh,
you got me there, Scott.
That's a whole other topic, but I will say that, I don't have it in front of me, but there's like open event. I think the gist of it is on the Windows platform, chronologically it's PowerShell. Going backwards, it's VB script, and before that, it's something I can't quite remember. With the current versions of FileMaker, I think PowerShell is your best bet. And then there's like I think it's an OpenDDE or something like that. I'd have to look at it where you write something out. I'll probably have to edit all this out because I'm flailing. But you can do stuff there. It's a little bit more work, I would say. I think AppleScript, here's a shout out for AppleScript. AppleScript is incredibly powerful because it can control so many applications, including the Finder. So it really makes for a robust workflow because you can control FileMaker, Word, the Finder. So not only can you do something, but you can make folders and folder directories. You can do a lot of the same stuff in PowerShell on the Windows platform.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you? But I don't think a lot of FileMaker developers know AppleScript. So I think that's sort of a dead end for FileMaker developers, isn't it?
It's AppleScript as a programming language is relatively. It's relative. It's kind of like FileMaker in that it's relatively easy, but it's relatively easy, and it's also deceptively difficult because in my opinion, to be a really good AppleScripter, you have to know AppleScript, which is a very basic language, very human-readable language, especially, depending on how you write your code, you can make it read like butter. And at the same time, to be a good AppleScripter, you want to know a lot of individual programs. Like you want to know how to program Microsoft Word or Excel or Entourage or
QuickBooks.
Or let's say, what's a good, very AppleScriptable program? Account Edge.
Account Edge, I'm sorry.
Account Edge or MoneyWorks.
Tony, you and I worked on this with other clients with AppleScript going to other programs, and it works beautifully from FileMaker.
Yeah, and that was actually our introduction. It was fairly amazing. I had been doing some Apple script integration, and Marion sent me this specification document. There was a Microsoft Word document. I think it was like 3 pages long. And you know how when you do a project, half of the battle is figuring out what's to be done, and the other half is writing the code, right?
Right.
And then I got this document from Marion, and it's like, I can write this, step by step by step. It was like screenshot and text in a Microsoft Word table, right?
Right.
And it was like 28 steps, and then it was like,
it was all documented.
All I had to do is turn it into code. It was already thought out.
Well, one of the things about screenshots, I'm going to put an aside in. When I did my Microsoft Word book, it was called Marianne Carroll's Super Desktop Documents with Microsoft Word. I had over 750 annotated screenshots.
Wow.
So that anybody who could look at this book and they didn't know what something was called, because I dare you to know how many people know what hanging indent really means, or that it's called that. So, and the table of contents says, I want to do something that looks like this, because nobody knows what that particular formatting process is called in Microsoft Word, so how can you even look for it, right? And so I had all these screenshots, and they really documented. You could just read it like a comic book. That was my objective within the book. It was for people to, we're very visual when we're programming, and not necessarily are we able to know what the words mean when you're doing word processing. You need to look at example. How does that margin look? What did you do? So the step-by-step process of documenting procedures, which Tony got from me when we were trying to do this Apple script, you knew all the steps because they had been, documented clearly.
Yeah, we got the project done, and it was made dramatically easier because you had like what I would call a documentation-driven development process, where you visualize and spell out, it's words and pictures. And then basically you go a couple rounds on that, and then you write the code. And maybe rev the code once or twice, but basically it's the shortest possible way to get to a working solution in most cases.
Right. And user documentation has been something I've done an awful lot of as well, in documenting systems for users, training. It's one of my strong suits back from the early 90s, let's put it that way. Tony, I just wanted to mention, too, when we talked about, the whole thing about sending an event from FileMaker, there is an open document within that particular script step that you can actually send the event with open document. You can specify the document. And what I do is I set up a number of templates for my clients that are generic, that have all the merge fields within them. So it would open that, go to the folder where that series of templates is, look for the specific template that accomplishes this task, brings it to the foreground. And it exports the text to a specific place in their file structure in everybody's desktop, so that it merges pretty seamlessly by just clicking on the print merge button. So your Apple script would probably be, do this script and then just hit the print merge or mail merge button, and voila, you've got your document.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting, Marianne, because I think all of us forget about Microsoft Word. Mm-hmm. We try to do all these big things in FileMaker, these big print jobs, and then I haven't thought about Microsoft Word's mail merge function in years, and you just reminded me that here we have this incredible tool that frees us from the limitations of printing very long documents in FileMaker, which it cannot handle, really. And so I have two questions. One is, what do you think about the 360works Scribe plugin, which natively lets FileMaker talk to Microsoft Word? There's no Apple scripting involved. There's no exporting, importing involved. The plugin handles everything for you.
I never got a chance to look at Scribe. I was considering it for one of my clients at one point in time, and then they didn't go forward with the project. So I haven't explored Scribe, which now that you've talked to me about it, I guess I'll have to.
Very cool. Very cool. One other thing I wanted to mention, it's a little tip in FileMaker Pro. This wouldn't work for like a really, really long document, like we've one text field that has to go over several pages. But if you're doing something like a contract, let's say in FileMaker Pro, where there's paragraphs, let's say, and you have predefined paragraphs, let's say, like a contract, and there's going to be like 12 paragraphs, so to speak. What you could do, it still wouldn't, FileMaker would still have a problem even if you had like 12 text fields, right? And they're varying lengths. FileMaker would still have a problem, page breaking those.
Absolutely.
It's a nightmare, but I figured out a trick in FileMaker Pro for something that's specific, like a paragraph-based document, like a contract, where you can define things in advance.
Right.
The trick is what you can do in FileMaker without leaving FileMaker is you can set up 12. Let's say you have a 12-paragraph contract. You could set up 12 small sub-summary parts and make sure you sort. So sub-summary, sorting by a constant field, like it always equals 1. Then the next sub-summary part is sorting by another constant field that's always 2. Then sorting by another field, which is 3. Basically, you have like 12 sub-summary parts. Then you sort your layout by all 12 of those fields. Basically, each sub-summary is based on a constant field, a calculation field, like the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4. Then you just sort by them, and what you end up with is 12 small sub-summary parts, but because they're small little fields, FileMaker can actually handle it better. And you can even decide which paragraphs you want to show and which ones you don't. And
then you can control page breaks that way. Didn't Brian Dunning do something like that ages ago, where
maybe
it would know the sub-summary? If it was part of that sub-summary, it would move it to another page. I saw something ages ago about that, and I was trying to remember that for this podcast, and I couldn't bring it up.
Something. You could play around with page breaks. Still, it's not, this is obviously not the ideal solution. Obviously Microsoft Word is the way to go for long documents. So, but yeah, there's things you can do. I think one of the cool things about the sub-summary parts is, like, let's say you want to leave a few of the paragraphs blank. You could just not sort by those particular sub-summaries, by those particular fields, and then those sub-summaries just disappear from your layout, so to speak. But still not as great as using Microsoft Word. Obviously, Microsoft Word would be the ideal solution.
But it's a combination, Scott, because a lot of times when, some of my clients, one that does a lot of grant making and philanthropy, and they have to export carefully worded documents based on the fields that we have in FileMaker, so that maybe a combination of some calculation fields, some if conditional, like if this equals that, then put this paragraph in, or, his, her. It may have options, within the FileMaker fields itself. So you may be exporting maybe a calculated text stream that will be picked up within the Microsoft document as well. So it can get complex depending on the particular client's needs. And, there's stuff like, logos that you might have to put in, different documents that you might have to use in different circumstances. So that's why the send event is a really cool FileMaker script step, because then you can, again, have conditions for which document you're going to use based on certain fields or certain types of contracts that you want to send, or whatever information is within there. You can get a lot of variables within it that, to the user, once you've defined all this, for them, they just want one button, as you know, right?
Right.
And you reminded me of something here. We've talked a little bit about how Microsoft Word FileMaker doesn't do as good a job in word processing. It's fine for one-page simple documents, but I think it's important to state that Microsoft Word is a horrible database.
Oh gosh, yes. You're right.
So I think they,
Even Excel is a horrible database.
well, that's true.
But, they used to have, way back in the old days, they used to have linking between Microsoft Word and Excel documents. You could link the two of them together and have them update and call one another. You could put, Excel tables in a Microsoft Word document as well. So there was early stages of this interoperability between Microsoft products, Word and Excel, but not to the common user and not to the faint-hearted. It could spin you into a whole other direction if you didn't know what you were doing.
So, Marianne, the projects that you're describing are, these are, I think, some of the most exciting projects. The projects where you're using, multiple applications and you're tying them together, and you're using them for the best. So you the best word processing together with the best data management, which obviously would be FileMaker, and tying them together, and then you get this 1 + 1 equals more than 2.
And I'm excited to see what the new version of Microsoft Word can do if they're looking at integrating FileMaker itself and within the product.
And let me
Tony,
go ahead.
as a follow-up to Marianne, we should have Jesse Barnum from 360 Works come on and talk about his Scribe plugin. Because the Scribe plugin natively talks to Microsoft Word without any exporting, importing, Apple scripting, nothing. It's just a FileMaker plugin. You only have to use FileMaker language, and it just talks natively. That would be a great follow-up to Marianne's discussion tonight.
Absolutely. And Jesse came to New York, the FileMaker Pro user group, gave a presentation, and he was another one of the presenters that brought an A game. And
what do you mean an A game? What? A what?
Meaning, we were joking around earlier in the previous podcast that if you come to the New York FileMaker Pro user group to give a presentation, bring your A game, because New York members are
they're tough. They're tough.
They can be tough. I mean, by the way, we have in New York we have pretty tough customers. No, we do. The customers that I work for, of course, they're all sweethearts and. And all that.
Customers are tough, so they make us tough? Is that what you're saying?
New Yorkers, it's a pretty fast-moving town. So, yeah, Jesse would be a great guest to have on the podcast. Hey, Marianne, I wanted to circle back to a question that you asked earlier. A couple questions, and one of them was out there about styles and in FileMaker. And here's my take, because Microsoft Word has its style sheets, and then FileMaker has implemented themes and styles, which is kind of a similar technology and also quite different because it's a different product. And that's a gigantic topic, a podcast of its own that we might circle back to. I think it's part art. How to manage themes and styles in FileMaker is part art and part science.
Right.
And I guess all I can say for this podcast is for anyone who went to any of the past 2 or 3 DevCons, there were some terrific 2 or 3 podcasts. There was some terrific presentations. I think many of them have been put on FileMaker Community, and it's a deep dive, goes beyond the scope. But I just wanted to kind of touch on that question because you asked it.
One thing, Tony, that just in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the new style sheets and themes in FileMaker. In Microsoft Word, you could set up styles so that if you hit the return key in a paragraph, it could throw you into another style, like,
Right. What's the next style?
Screenplays, like you can have the one speaker, a dialogue, and then you got for the asides. And one of my very first jobs was doing transcripts for a media service that they were recording I guess it was ABC television. They were recording people out in the field, and as they were recording, my client was on a line feed via telephone to cassettes. Every half hour, she'd pull off a cassette, give it to her transcribers, and they'd be sitting there typing with, and this was actually MacWrite, not MacWrite, Right Now. Remember that early word processor, Right Now?
And they had style sheets.
They had style sheets, and they also were able to use quick keys to put it into a foot pedal, so they could hit a certain quick key and it would give the time code.
Yeah.
So they would type these things up, they'd print them out, and they'd have them at the station when the crew came in from the field, so they had visuals they could run through quickly to find the sound bites that they wanted for it, and they could go right to that editing spot and find them. So they used a visual word process document for that particular interview or broadcast that they could help them edit in the studio when they got there.
It's important stuff. It's the, I obviously haven't done as much as you. I do remember I was doing work for a company, or I guess a nonprofit called Humanities, an environmental T-shirt company, and there was here's another program. There was a lot of 4D going on up there, and I was.
Helix was its competitor at one point in time.
I think it was FileMaker 4D, Omnis 7.
Omnis, yeah.
And some of those, I don't know. FileMaker's still around. I know that for sure. Actually, FileMaker's now the big market share, obviously.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to mention, too, is that in this whole Microsoft Word world and the automatic styles and being able to type quickly for screenplays, I had a wild assignment for Saturday Night Live to help them with their scripts as they were preparing for the show live between the rehearsal show and the actual show, and the people typing things up last minute to get them in the final show, which was quite a project for Microsoft Word at the time. Yeah.
Well, wow, that's interesting. I think you were using FileMaker or just Microsoft Word for that?
Microsoft Word, unfortunately. Those were the days.
You find, so you've obviously done a lot of consulting in Microsoft Word. Is there, are there still Microsoft Word consultants?
Not that I'm aware of. To be honest with you, on the Mac, it kind of all ended for us when Microsoft Word 6 came out, and it was more like the PC version than the Mac version.
That was not a good version.
And they went to macros, and the program died. People couldn't work anymore in Microsoft Word. It was so slow and cumbersome. So I was happy at that point because I was introduced to FileMaker, and I kind of said, well, goodbye, Microsoft Word. I'm going to FileMaker. And the world got very much brighter for me.
Much more fun, more powerful.
A lot more fun. And, you could get larger projects because typically, the Microsoft Word assignments for an afternoon.
Yeah.
Whereas FileMakers can extend into months and years.
You can build a system for a company or an organization to run their business.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a lot more fun, I have to say, in FileMaker, though.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting to remind us that there is an app out there called Microsoft Word that a lot of FileMaker developers don't think about because, and so I think that's really great that you've refreshed our memory about this app that's still very usable today.
Yep. Retrograde. We can look back to the past and bring it back into the future.
Yeah, just to let you know, I have not launched Microsoft Word in so incredibly long that the version I have on my hard drive is the 2008 version. I guess that's not too outdated, but I
think maybe they might be with these new features of collaboration and licenses for Office that you allow five users can use one. That's what it looks like, how they're selling it, that you can have multiple users of the same license. And they're looking to a much more collaborative capability with Microsoft products. They're looking for threading comments and seamless integration with different kinds of SharePoints and, an updated user interface and it's also Office 2016 works only with Yosemite.
I think it's interesting how we all get pulled in different directions. Scott was doing a ton of scheduling kind of stuff with Kessel cameras and a lot of iPad stuff. Marianne's, you've got this whole Word background. I've done a lot of AppleScript. John did some really interesting things with the FMP URL protocol. We all get pulled in different directions and get, specialties. And at the same time, I think it's, like Scott was saying, it's really useful and important to be aware of what other things there are to be done. So if one of our clients for whom we're doing maybe scheduling or whatnot says, oh, by the way, we have to do these contracts, and we want them to look nice and sharp, and then you either know how to do, or kind of like, oh, I know I can do that. So yeah, I can do that, and then you just go home and build an AppleScript or use the Scribe plugin or use the send event thing. So it's terrific to know about these things, and then just know about them so that you can service your clients and tell them what the possibilities are.
Well, at FileMaker developer meetings in the city, you learn what developers have that specialty, so you can, do team consulting with them.
Partner up.
Partner up, as we have, Tony, on a number of occasions.
Yeah, and it's more important. I think it's more important than ever because, right, Scott, the platform is getting so wide.
Boy, is it.
Are you talking about FileMaker or Microsoft?
Yes. Well,
the FileMaker Platform, well, let's see. So how would you define it? You have the FileMaker Platform, right? And then if you take a look at what FileMaker's given us, one of what I think of as the three pillars, and maybe every podcast I should say them, rapid application development, and I'll say them in a different order this time, the ability from a single code base to deploy to the desktop, Mac and PC, to the web, and to mobile from a single code base, right? One development environment.
True.
Kind of
there are a lot of modern development languages that are iOS only, but and a lot of people are saying the desktop is dying.
No, it's not.
Right, but the thing is, it's not necessarily dying, and that's one of the FileMaker's strengths is that it still has its foot in the desktop world.
right.
I think, to be able to do all three and then to do this whole application integration, which on this podcast we've seen with John and Marianne as our guests, as our special fanatics for this podcast. Marianne's talked a lot about desktop integration, and John was talking about iOS integration. And last podcast we were talking a lot about web integration, and FileMaker can do all of it. So the platform has got kind of like fuzzy edges because it can expand.
That's true. Now,
Right.
here's my question, Marianne. I have a lot of clients that have now abandoned Microsoft Office because, Microsoft is a behemoth that, is thankfully not really that influential anymore in the tech world. They do have Office and Windows pretty much. And, but, my clients are now all doing Google Docs. Not all of them, but, they've all, not all of them, but a lot of them have shifted to Google Docs because it's a lot real-time collaboration. I guess Microsoft.
That's what Microsoft is doing with 2016. Office 2016 is the collaboration.
Okay. Well, here's my question. Here's my question for you. Does Google Docs have the ability to do mail merges and import this data that we export out of FileMaker? Or do we need to use Microsoft Office for these mail merges?
I don't know. That's a good question for me to research.
I would, since I don't know the answer, but that's not going to stop me. No, I would. Google Docs is definitely, I would say, taking a bite out of the Microsoft market share.
I think the whole next generation is growing up on Google Docs.
I think in general, the web apps are what I would call, in economic terms, a substitutable good a lot of times, in that Google Docs is definitely, it has the advantage of being pretty much free unless you get in the Google Apps package, and whether or not it'll be free forever, kind of an open question. But the fact that it's free, I think Microsoft will probably still outperform Google Docs when you want to do sophisticated pagination with some of the features that, deep feature set that Microsoft Word has with style sheets and whatnot.
But that's kind of rare, to be honest, in the world. There's most professionals that I meet in my business, they've had to have Microsoft Word training. Everybody knows Word and Excel. It's kind of expected that they would. And how many times can we put a FileMaker report in Excel? Can you export to Excel so I can work with it in the way that I like to work with
Apple
data? Don't you get a lot of that?
We get we get reports. Here's our standard protocol. Someone says we want to export to Excel. Depending on the client, we'll pretty much always ask why.
Yes.
Although we'll ask nicely, how come? What are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
And then, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, if they have a legitimate reason and a note from their doctor, we will say, they'll say we're trying to send something to somebody who doesn't have FileMaker, they only have Excel. We're like, okay, legitimate, we'll build you an Excel, pretty straightforward. If they say we're trying to produce this report that we're going to print on a piece of paper, we'll be like, we can do that in FileMaker, and it'll be easier, cheaper, and better.
But what if you have the people that feel comfortable in Excel and they want to just play with the data? They want to play around with it, give me just the straight data, and I want to rearrange it, sort it, do what I want with it because I feel comfortable in Excel. Have you ever had that?
That's fine. They want to move the data around. They want to do some what-if analysis. Sure, that's legitimate. build
You know,
an
as long as
export.
they're starting in FileMaker where we can give them a fully polished interface and all that, then we can give them a little export button if they want to play around with the raw data out in Excel.
Yeah, and the FileMaker table capability, sometimes people get lost with that, and sometimes it's a little scary for me for a somewhat novice user to be playing around with the table view.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I have not played much with table view.
It opens you up to some potential issues that I wouldn't give to just a novice user, or one that's been pretty much heavily trained to only follow the routes that we give them when they do things.
What do you mean, some issues? Which issues are you referring to in specific?
Well, that you can add fields to your table view, and you might actually...
Oh, can that not be disabled in security privileges?
Probably, but you'd have to go deeper, is what I'm saying. You can't just say, I'll just throw that into a table view for you. You have to think about it a little bit more seriously than just exporting out data to Excel and let them do what they want.
I've almost never played with table view in FileMaker because it's so not applicable to, for us, for any of us, to create solutions with table view. So I don't know much about it, but just, you're right. It's best just to export it out, let them play with it in Excel if they want. It doesn't affect your database in any way.
Right.
I think I think it comes down to options and often communication. Just asking the question. Usually, it's not that expensive to ask the question, "What are you trying to do?" Because if you ask it 10 times, you're going to get some hits where what they're asking you to do from a programming point of view. Please do this task, right? You often get hits where you're like, oh, if that's what you're trying to do, I can do it in half the time and give you something that works twice as well. So we ask, and I have no problem flipping it out to Excel in a simple Excel export, sometimes in a more complicated Apple script where you'll put it into a more complex Excel document with specific formatting and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Or, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, yeah, FileMaker's better, and build a beautiful button, keep them in FileMaker, and you can add some features. Table view is definitely the kind of like detail and view is kind of the backbone of any detail views. Detail views, what does FileMaker call them? FileMaker kind of like says, here you go. You've got view as form, view as list, and view as table. So form, what they call form, I call detail. Detail views and list views, that's the backbone. And table views are good. They're useful. They have their uses. They're sort of like the third most useful type of layout, I'd say.
But the problem with table views, if you take them there, you have to give them a way to get back to someplace else because they don't have buttons, they don't have scripting capability. So you can give them something in a scripts menu.
Well, you can add headers. You can put stuff in headers. You could add your own buttons to headers.
We should have a special guest on to
that
talk
knows about
table views.
Table view.
The much maligned, underused, but super duper feature of FileMaker.
We're going to have to look for whichever FileMaker developer on the planet knows the most about the underused table view.
So if you're listening, send us your resume. No, just kidding. Send us an email at the fan at fan at FileMaker Fanatics, FileMaker-Fanatics.com. There's an email right on the webpage, or any other topic that you'd like to hear us cover, whatever the heck it might be. Send your suggestions.
And I was wondering, Tony, I had a question. Is there a FileMaker Fanatics litmus test? Like, you get a link or something, you get an email or something like 50 quotes by Wayne Dyer, worth remembering, and, do you copy the text, parse it, import it into FileMaker, then figure out how to make it a random generated, thought for the day?
I don't know, Scott. Should we have like a pledge? You just say, or some secret handshake or something. I think all you have to do is say, I am a FileMaker fanatic, and I'm proud, or I'm proud to be a FileMaker fanatic.
No. I'm glad that Marianne brought this up because I think our standards are too low. I think you're right, Marianne. We actually should have a test. We should have like an initiation. We should have. I mean, there's a lot more we should be doing, right? We should have a blood oath.
Actually, yes, you have to bleed purple, I think is the standard.
I have to tell you, 10 years ago, I had my appendix out, and when I went under for the what did they call it? Anesthetic anesthetize, whatever.
Anesthetics or something? No.
And I was wondering,
Anesthesia?
Scott, you want to take a shot at it? I give up.
when I came out of that, I wasn't sure what it would be like, because, I'd never been under anesthesia. And I was wondering what it would be like. My first word out of my mouth was database.
No.
I didn't say FileMaker, because I saw this image
I think that's close enough.
portal.
I
Hey,
think
you
it's
win,
close enough.
Marion. That's why you're on the show tonight.
I saw a portal in my consciousness, but it was blank. It had no data. And my mouth said database. And I realized it's a gateway between conscious worlds, right? And my mind went to that image that I know as a gateway.
I've been telling Tony I wanted the show to be more spiritual, and thank you for finally doing that, Marianne, for us.
So
In
you
other
have,
words, when
bringing this-
people have these near-death experiences and they talk about this portal of white light, that's actually a FileMaker portal. Is that
that is
Wait,
but no data in it.
by the way, Marianne was right. I'm looking at table view right now. You cannot see any headers or any footers or any title headers
Nothing
or
to get
title
you-
footers in table view.
You can't get back to where you were. You have to give them something.
Oh my God! How do
Well,
you do that?
there's all right. I'm gonna give away one of my top secrets here. So this secret is actually too good to share. So if you're listening to the podcast, I would ask that you stop listening for the next few minutes because I really don't want to give away this tip. But here it goes. In the top 10 scripts are super duper important because they're all tied, even without custom menus, they're tied to special keyboard shortcuts, which is Command 1 or Command 0, that's 10, or Control on the Windows platform. And those are super duper. And which
No,
one
as long as you check the checkbox for them to show up in the scripts menu, and as
Right.
long as you have the scripts menu showing. So there are some caveats.
Yes.
That's true. And I'm a better person for that correction. And so I use the home screen as Command 1. Command 2 is the detail screen for whatever layout I'm on. Command 3 is the list view for the table context that I'm on, or actually the table occurrence context, if you want to be technically correct. And then Command 4 could be your go to the table that is appropriate, the layout for the table occurrence that's appropriate.
Right.
And if you're using Ankabui, the table occurrence and the table occurrence are going to map
Right.
to be the same if you're working off a base table, as perhaps you should be.
Well, what would happen if I took somebody to table view, I would give them a little dialog box that would say, to get back, go to the scripts menu and choose, or do Command 1 or whatever it was. Because people would get there and not know how to get out.
And how many times do they have to see that dialogue before they tell you to turn it off?
Right?
Wow, I didn't realize till tonight's discussion that table view is even worse than I thought it was. God, it's so funny. I mean, I really never use table view. It's really bad.
All right. So we like to have controversy on the podcast. So I will say table view is one of the top 3 types of layouts that you can have.
Table view is the top thing. Well, Marianne, thanks so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed being here. Thanks for having me.
And we want to thank Aaron.
Well, Aaron and John had to bow out early, right when John was done talking. They both had to leave, so they're not here right now.
Is there anything we want to say about them while they're not here on the show?
There's so much we want to say about them behind their back, but we've run out of time.
Otherwise, we would, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're in wrap up mode then. I don't know. Thanks to all our listeners worldwide.
Worldwide, we have 1 listener in Australia, 2 in New Zealand, and 1 in London. Thank you.
We actually, the what do you call it? The stats from the various platforms from which our podcast is delivered to the world indicate that we've got we have pretty decent listenership from around the world. It's a top secret, it's national security. We can't say. But we have huge listener bases.
We have literally over 10 listeners at this point.
We actually, we have, last I checked, we have 16 people following us as channel followers in YouTube. The YouTube stats are visible. We have massive downloads, and we're currently downloading from archive.org. It's not entirely clear we have. The counters, basically, we're not able to go up as high.
You know what, Tony? I have a suggestion.
Uh-oh.
I think we need a FileMaker Fanatics theme song.
I agree. And I
would recommend
think
Fade in and fade out.
Chic.
I
What
totally
was the song?
agree.
Can we get licensing
She,
to?
Freak Out was the song.
Oh yeah,
Actually,
freak out. Ooh, that's
FileMaker-
good.
Freak out.
Maybe I'll talk to Nile Rodgers. We'll see.
Could we hire Carly Rae what's her name? Carly Rae Jepsen or whatever? She did that song "Call Me Maybe." Maybe she can do our theme song. And she's very popular. She's got like 100 million followers on Twitter. So if we can get her to do our theme song, we'll have like 100 million instant listeners.
Or Nile Rodgers, who was my boss in Chic.
Now we're talking. I think we should turn this into a music show.
Well, Marianne, you are officially in charge of
I'm in charge of the new theme song.
the music committee of the FileMaker Fanatics.
Right. I'll be working on it between now and next time.
We look forward to hearing what you come up with.
All right.
So, thanks everybody. Thanks Marianne and John for coming on, and the regular people. Scott.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, bye all.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.